Yeah.
No, Gary, is Andrea coming to the call, or are you taking? Was there a discussion earlier in the week about either you or Andrea or not?
Yeah, no, Andrew's on leave today, so
That's what I thought.
Yeah,
okay.
I'll be around if any assistance is needed.
Yeah, are you covering note taking as well, Gary? Is that?
Yeah, between us, we'll have that sorted. Yeah, no problem.
Bless you. Welcome everybody on the call. I understand from Gary that we are live. My name is Graham Bell. I'm independent member of the Audit and Governance Committee, and I am in the position of chair. This is a consultation call for members. The previous call having been back in September. Gary, just so that we can cover off attendance, I can see that we have Councillor Little and Councillor Robinson. I haven't got everybody on my screen, I don't think. Can we just cover off attendance so that everybody is aware of hearing, and we can cover off chorusy as well, please?
Yeah, just bear with me a second whilst I get up who is on the call. So we've got Councillor Robinson and Councillor Little. We've also got Councillor Mundry. And then we've got Campbell Dearden, Kieran Barker, Daniela, David Pevelin, David Spilsbury, Karen Murray, Kevin Brady, and obviously yourself, Sally Haslam from the DFT, and Simon McLone as well.
Grand. Thank you, Gary. Kevin, sorry, I couldn't see you on my and Hans, I couldn't see you either on my initial list. But yeah, welcome to everybody on the call. In terms of members' interests, does anybody have anything which they wish to cover off in respect of contents on the agenda or anything else? Grand. Thank you. So minutes, the minutes came out as part of the pre-meeting pack some days ago. So the previous meeting, the minutes for the 21st of September, which also make reference to the meeting before that, which I think was back in July. So if we can just run through the main topic headings in that document, just to ensure that people are comfortable that they represent an accurate record of meeting. The first section on risk review. Is everybody comfortable with that? Okay, and the next section covered business planning, which spoke about EVCI, which we're going to pick up later, but if everybody's comfortable with the business planning section. The next section in the minutes was internal update. Section after that was external update. Everybody okay with that? We had that was followed by draft audit and governance committee annual report, and the final section was year-end statutory accounts. Is everybody comfortable? Anybody got any overall comments or final comments on the minutes? Grand, thank you.
Chair, if I could just pop in. All the matters arising out of the minutes from the last meeting are captured in agenda items that are picked up in this meeting. So there's a lot relating to risk and gets picked up by changes to the risk register, which Danielle will mention, and also the deep dive. But we'll capture all the matters arising in the minutes for this time round.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we have allocated 30 minutes for corporate risk review, within which we're seeking to do a deep dive onto one of the topics that we discussed at some length last time. Daniela has sent out the material for that. So, Daniela, I'm passing over to you in terms of framing that discussion.
Yeah, no problem. Morning, everyone. First of all, I'd just like to go through some of the changes that we've made to the corporate risk register since we last met, and then we'll go into the sort of deep dive for EBCI. So I'm just going to sort of share my screen with you. So in terms of the exec summary and TFN's current risk environment, we're still very closely monitoring the risks around the current fiscal environment, including the rising cost of inflation, and obviously in line with the announcements that were made yesterday. We're also continuing to prepare for the business plan for 23-24, working closely with the directors of TFN and with DFT to ensure we prioritise the business plan for 23-24. And also we're monitoring the changes of government commitments, and that's in response to the recent changes to the political environment as well. So in terms of the key changes that we've made to the corporate risk register this time round, following the imminent departure of the Business Capabilities Director, we've now reassigned all risks relevant to the owners to human resources, legal and cybersecurity, ownership of those risks, as well as co-sponsorship. So those risks have now all been reassigned to the Strategic Rail Director, and that's in line with TFN's new operating model. So in terms of, I know we had quite a bit of discussion around EBCI as part of Audit and Governance Committee last time, and how it's sort of not captured at corporate level. And I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on that as we go into the deep dive. But what we've actually done is we've incorporated some of the mitigation actions that we have around EBCI into two of the corporate risks, and also the opportunity that we have around the Centre of Excellence. So you'll notice those changes in the main body of the report. One of the main changes that we've made this time around is in relation to the recruitment and retention of staff for 2022-23, and we've reduced the probability of this risk. And that's primarily due to TFN are now in sort of quarter 3 or 4, and recruitment of those roles is progressing well. So they're the sort of main changes that have been made to the register this time round, and that's how the dashboard currently looks in terms of the prioritisation of the risk themes. That's in terms of the corporate risk. Now we did have, in September, we had a risk maturity audit which was done by RSM, and I won't go into too much detail on that because I'm sure Kieran will, but I did put in the report that we'd had 4 management actions that have come out of that, and we're working on that over the next 6 to 12 months. But again, I won't go into too much detail on that. But I'd like to now focus on the deep dive for EBCI, but has anyone got any questions first of all on the updates to the corporate risk register? No, happy to move on. Okay, fabulous. Okay, so one of the first things that I'd like to go through first of all is how we structure risk in terms of TFN's risk management structure. So the reason you wouldn't necessarily see EBCI within the corporate risk register is we've got project and functional risks, and they're sort of those risks, the 81 of those risks are broadly captured within those 11 risk themes. Then what we do is we amalgamate them and we look at the risks that could impact on TFN strategic objectives, or risks that sit across multiple risk registers, and that's how we then create those 27 risk factors. So electric vehicle charging infrastructure is actually managed at project level, and it has a risk register that's reviewed monthly. So in terms of the deep dive, then Simon McGlone, who's the project manager for EBCI, has kindly sort of come today in terms of to discuss obviously any questions around the current risks that we have on the project. So I'm taking the papers as read in terms of the EBCI project background information, and also the risks that are there at the moment. I know Graham's responded via email in terms of a couple of sort of discussion areas and queries. So I think we can make a start on this now if everyone's happy to go into the deep dive. Graham, shall we start with some of those questions that you've raised, or should we open it up?
Yeah, it would. I think it'd be useful to sort of step through the detail first, maybe.
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, we've got a risk around TFN's resource capacity. Simon, would you like to go through this in a little more detail in terms of maybe if we frame it first and then go into the risks, if that's okay?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And good morning, everyone. So I'm Simon McGlone, Senior Planning and Strategy Officer in the Major Roads team in TFN. So as Daniela said, I'm the project manager for this piece of work. It might be useful just to frame the project with a few numbers, if that's okay, and forgive me if you know these, but by way of background, 97% of personal journeys, 88% of freight journeys are on the highways across the north. They carry around about a quarter of the UK road emissions, 6% of the total UK emissions. So we really need to be taking action on the highways. And there's obviously our broader decarbonisation strategy that was agreed across the north behind all of this. So EVs is one part of that wider decarbonisation strategy. In terms of EVs, I think last time maybe you touched on where the north is compared to other parts of the country. So just to pull that out a little bit more, at the moment we're seeing electric vehicle uptake around 1 in 4 new car registrations are EVs. Back in August 2022 that was. So it's an uptake that is increasing pretty much weekly, monthly now. At the moment, we're seeing that EVs really coming to the fore. In terms of what that means for the vehicle fleet, obviously there's registrations and then there is the entire fleet. The national average for EVs is around 2.2%. The north is behind on that front. We're around 1.7%. So in terms of EVs, we're a little bit behind. In terms of charging, if you take the government's figures, as a region, we have around 35 chargers per 100,000 population. That's how they present it. So 35 per 100,000. The UK average is 52 per 100,000. So again, as a region, a little bit behind on that front as well. Now, our modelling that produced the framework that we're talking about today highlights that the current position that we're in across the north, we have about 5% of what we need in 2030. So clearly there's a way to go, and hopefully I've kind of set the scene in terms of what we're trying to support really as one of the solutions to decarbonisation. We really need that rapid increase of charging across the north to support our decarbonisation ambitions. Now, there were a few questions, really useful questions about the objectives around the project, so I might just flow into those if that's okay, Chair. I think questions about the objectives and how they're framed in the report that we've got. Primarily, these are all project objectives to support our wider ambitions, as I said. They are written to take account of the outcomes that we'd really like to see across the north and encourage, but also account for the role that TFN plays in that. So in the objectives, you'll see that it's about facilitating, providing new evidence, supporting different aspects that can enhance delivery. We are one part of a wider deployment network, really planning a deployment network. Local authorities will take a very active role in the actual physical deployment of this stuff. TFN's role is perhaps more of a guiding and a facilitating role in terms of our remit that we have at the moment. So just to go into that a little bit more, so you've hopefully seen the 4 objectives on the slides we've presented, but just to outline how we're doing that as TFN. So firstly, this is a new enhanced evidence base. It's enhanced in 3 ways, I'd say. In terms of the data that goes in, it really draws on the powerful elements that we've got within TFN's modelling capability, allows us to take this sort of work further than has been done before. It's enhanced in terms of the geographic scale, so we can cut this by the region, but you can really zoom into community level now and really into place, and that's really important for EV, because obviously what is needed for charging in one place will be very different to another. And we also need to account for place-based strategies that local authorities have across the region. So that's really important. And then finally, it's an open piece of kit. The outcomes that we've got are all openly available online through an interactive tool that you can go in and play around with. And that's really important. So we wanted to make this a piece of kit that supported the local authorities' work. That was fundamental. But also something that highlighted the opportunities for investment across the north. So clearly some of this will be needed. We'll be needing private sector investment as well. So that was really key. Other steps we've taken is this is a clear and consistent view really across the region. So we're tackling those cross-boundary movements. We're getting away from siloed strategies around charging, and we're really doing this thing at scale. And we're doing it across years out to 2050, across 5-year increments, so that you can start identifying the right charging solution in the right place at the right time. Other bits that we've done is I chair a regional EV steering group, which really supports the collaborative objectives that you can see in the report. This is about drawing all of our public partners together into one place, sharing the same evidence, sharing the same plans and strategies, and taking us along that journey at speed together. We've also expanded that out to the energy sector. Really important that we draw in our planning across sectors for this sort of work. There's significant planning for transport, but also for the electricity grid and what that means for our partners there. So you'll see that we've extended our partnerships out in that vein. And then finally, there's an objective around, and I'll shut up after this, but there's an objective around managing uncertainty and adding resilience into our planning. So the model behind all of this, the tool behind all of this, the intellectual property sits with us. That means that we can mold and shape this as new trends and evidence comes to the fore. There is still, it's a new market. There is still uncertainty around the technology and the charging behaviours that we might see. But having that IP sit with us means that we can adjust as that evidence arises. And it also means that local authorities don't need to go out and keep spending money on suppliers to do this work over and over again. We've got this tool in-house that's readily available for our partners across the region. I'll stop there because I feel like I've spoken a lot, but hopefully that touches on a few of the points at the start of your email, Graham, and perhaps I can pick up anything else by way of discussion.
Yeah, that was, I'm sure colleagues will have found that as informative as I did. So just, it is, Simon, thank you. It is probably a good opportunity just to pause and invite members to pose any questions or thoughts that they have at this moment. Liam.
Well, thanks very much, Graham. And I suppose first and foremost, I don't know whether I need to declare the fact I am an electric vehicle owner. So if I do, please can we sort of note that down accordingly. No, I wanted to sort of comment, Simon and the whole team, what a great piece of proactive work this is for the organisation, because lots of people see kind of electric vehicles as a key part of how we sort of decarbonise the transport network, and they are. They're not the silver bullets, because we need to kind of make sure public transport and other options are strengthened accordingly as well. But the infrastructure issue is an absolutely vital one, because something that so far has been seen as predominantly a market-led solution rather than a coordinated infrastructure-led solution. Kind of really needs to be addressed, because I know in my own sort of journeys I make, I end up having to kind of sometimes not use my electric car and use my wife's petrol car, because there are sometimes kind of some locations I have to go to where there isn't public transport, and there can be small towns or villages where there isn't any charging infrastructure. So the fact that we're already kind of thinking about that in a more strategic fashion on a North of England footprint. And I think, to be honest as well, what's great is that doing this as a piece of risk-based work, which is not so much the risk for TFN as an organisation, because we're not involved in direct delivery, we're more kind of in a strategic and coordinating function. But there is huge risks for the north of England, its economy and its transport network, if there isn't a joined up solution to how we kind of make sure the relevant infrastructure is in place. So I just wanted to praise you on what I think is a very, very good proactive piece of work, and shows where TFN actually is probably leading the country, not just leading the north on this. So that was all I wanted to sort of say at this point, Graham.
Grant, thank you. Liam, appreciate that. Kevin.
Yeah, just a couple of, I suppose, queries really on the presentation, which was excellent, Simon. Thanks for that. And the background papers were really useful as well. I suppose we've seen in the corporate risk sort of review that there's still issues around the sort of legal and licensing side of TAME, and I just wondered whether, because you've sort of indicated with the ECVI tools, it seems that we're not hitting those sorts of challenges, or are we? So I suppose that was a question. You know, are the two things interrelated? You know, in terms of that, trying to sort of position TAME as a centre of excellence, and is this part of that? And if it is, and we're already able to share stuff, well, is that pointing the way forward for us for wider sharing of intellectual property, etc. And a second, and a sort of related but separate really, if we've sort of paved the way at TFN for local authorities, is there a risk that there is still that danger of individual local authorities wanting to go it alone and duplicating rather than collaborating? So I suppose it's just, you know, are we comfortable with the current situation across the north, or is there still work to be done to encourage that sort of sharing of IP? Thanks.
Would you like me to answer those now, Chair?
Yeah, sure, Simon. I think we'd all benefit from that. Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Okay. So on the legal and licensing side, this was actually a risk on our register earlier in the year. We probably came at this a little bit earlier than others, just by nature of where the project was up to. So it's now not on our risk register because we've tackled that. We've gone through all the due legal processes. We have all the checks in place for the EV tool that we're discussing today. I think it's probably on the wider corporate register because there are still other projects that need to go through that. But yes, we've done all the checks and balances on that. We're in a good place in terms of where we are now with the data that we use to be confident that we can take that forward. Clearly, if we expand and the beauty of publishing something like this is that there are then new avenues to improve and enhance. If that means new data, then we'll have to stay aware of any license checks that we need to do there. Having all of that in place puts us in a really nice position in terms of the Centre of Excellence. As you mentioned, we've had some, I should have mentioned really, that we've had some really good interest from the Office of Zero Emission Vehicles and DFT to spread this tool nationally. That they're really happy with the work we've done. They'd really like to see that map, so the map of charging demand taken right across the nation. So having all of that license, all of those license elements locked in, really puts us in a nice place to move on with that at an ideal time for TFN, really. In terms of the local authorities, so the steering group that we run allows us to understand how local authorities are actioning things on their patches. We see lots of differences, actually, that there are teams who have forecasts of their own, which is absolutely fine. You can use local and ours to validate against each other. And in fact, you've actually got a really strong idea then across the two. There are other partners who are using actively what we've produced for their plans and strategies. So it's slightly mixed. And
Simon just froze there.
Yeah.
Until Simon comes back, perhaps if I would just fill the void then.
Sorry, everyone, I lost internet there.
Oh, there he's back. You're back, Simon. Away you go.
Sorry. So it is slightly mixed across the partnership at the moment, but we are seeing active use of the evidence we've got in levelling up submissions, bid submissions, local infrastructure around EV submissions as well. We are seeing active use from partners of that, and I think that will only ramp up now that we've got the material out there and people are starting to understand more and more what we've built within our framework. So hopefully that answers the question. Sorry, my internet dropped out there.
That's great, Simon. Grateful for that. That's really comprehensive. Thanks very much.
If I could just extend it just a little bit, just so we put it all in the context of business planning. We're presently talking to the department about what would a centre of excellence look like, and there's really a whole range of solutions as to what that could be. I mean, I suppose right now what we're doing as part of this work that's been done around EV was primarily under what was called the in-year funding. Members will recall an element of funding that was granted by Baroness Vearness. I think it was 336,000, and of that, an element was set aside for EV. So it's a separate piece of work over and above our core duties, and it's proved to be a tremendous success. And I think what we're endeavouring to speak to the department to now is say, look at this good piece of work. If you want more doing of that form, then please support us and fund us. But it's not something that we could just do as we couldn't stop doing our core duties and start doing a lot of work around that supports other LAs or even other STBs nationally. I think strategically, I think it's the right thing for us to do, and I think it's the right thing for the department to do. I don't see the benefit of other LAs or other STBs going through the journey that we've been through, if they can. So I think it's a very good value for money solution. Based on the autumn statement yesterday, I mean, clearly good value for money solutions are what's going to be needed. So we think it plays very well into the agenda that the department have got to deliver against. But we'll see. We're hopeful before the end of December the department will come back and say, well, there's an allocation that captures your core duties, plus also something that embraces what we want to consider for a centre of excellence. So it's the balance between the two, and I think I think we've got statutory duties that we have to deliver. There's an Act of Parliament that's in place for those to be delivered, but equally I think delivering, enhancing it, and fine tuning it for areas that we can support other STBs and other local authorities makes great sense and reinforces us as an organisation. So I think it fits very well at the right level.
Right, thank you, Paul. Does anybody else have any questions or comments in respect of where we've got to? Keith, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks for the presentations. Obviously, local authorities are at very different levels, and in Cumbria, we are probably far away from where we really should be. But I think it's acknowledged that by working together across the north through TFN, that's where we're going to get our best results from. The take-up of electric vehicles isn't as strong in the north, in my neck of the woods, as it perhaps could be. And there is a real concern as to how it's going to develop going forward. But we have worked over a number of years with our district authorities to find sites. Some of our schools are now introducing sites, but I see very little take-up by the energy providers, the petrol stations, that kind of thing, to introduce these on a greater scale. And when I do travel up and down the country, which I do on a regular basis, I see people queuing up at the large petrol stations, filling stations on the M6, waiting for people to move on so they can get charged up. It's not the best of systems at the moment. I know one lady who has bought one of these, and she spends 2 or 3 hours standing in a car park of a night time waiting to charge up because she cannot get anywhere near her own home to be able to park and get supplies. So it is a difficult situation at the moment. Thank you.
Thanks, Keith. Yeah, I think Simon, from from my point of view, I think one of the measures of success with all of this work isn't necessarily how many charging points we manage to get in by 2030. It's how we seek to address social exclusion, which is, I think, is an extension of what Keith was just talking about. And you know, there are millions of people who don't have easy access to on-street charging infrastructure, even if it was in place. And but I think also from a project point of view, one of the assumptions that you've probably made is that people will continue to have to park their vehicle next to infrastructure in order to charge it. And we know that technology improves and advances. If we could get to a point where car batteries were the size of a suitcase or a briefcase, then people could simply take them out and take them home. So you know that the whole basis upon which we plan infrastructure will continue to change. But I think the other point I was going to make about the project is that the only certainty in all of this is that your modelling will be wrong, and the assumptions that you've made that sit behind that will prove to be wrong. And I think if you look back at what's happened this year, it used to be quite cheap to charge your electric vehicle. It isn't now as cheap as it was 6 months ago. And when you bought your electric vehicle, Liam, you were probably considering not having to pay tax or excise duty on that vehicle. And so it's the sort of the dynamic nature of where this project sits, I think. So from a risk point of view, I'd be interested to know how you would cater, how you think the project is catering for those ever-changing assumptions or sort of contextual points, I suppose. I'm not trying to trip you up. It's just although that is the purpose of a deep dive, perhaps, but it's that sort of making sure that we don't think of project risks as, I guess, static is the short way of making it.
And I think that applies across a lot of areas, doesn't it? Sorry,
sure.
Sam.
Yeah, sure.
No, I was just going to say great questions and happy to pick those up where I can. So the inclusivity or exclusion aspect is really key for me, both in terms of EV user and non-car EV user, because whilst we're talking about the uptake of EVs, we also need to consider the impact of other transport users around the region, really, in terms of what that infrastructure does to pavements and parking and whatnot. So really key. And in terms of that uptake, the framework that we've got does the whole region. So it does the urban and the rural areas that we all know across the north of England. We really wanted to make sure that we were highlighting the requirements right across the network. I guess to use broadband as an example, you don't want the same experience that perhaps we had with broadband in terms of EV uptake. So it does highlight the needs right across the north, and that being openly available should, we hope, encourage that private sector investment into those opportunities. I think historically private sector or even currently will look for the commercially viable options, but there may be delivery models where you can entice them to take up a certain level of the less commercially viable ones, along with the say 80% of the big ticket bits. So there's different ways to cut it, but the evidence we've got puts it all out there in terms of the needs right across the north. In terms of uncertainty, yes, definitely there's uncertainty around the technology that we're talking about, both in terms of the battery technology in the car and the charging technology in terms of the infrastructure. There's uncertainty about how people will travel in the future. So we recognise all of that, and what we've got gives us a mechanism to better manage that. So we use our future travel scenarios within TFN to map out what different future travel patterns might mean for EV uptake, therefore charging behaviour. And we've also got some assumptions in there which are informed by academia and the industry around current technology. Now they will shift, so we'll have to shift with those, but that gives us the mechanism to do that we haven't had previously, and to do it openly as well. So to do it in a collaborative way, I think is a real strength. You know, we're not protecting what we've produced here. We're putting it out there into the open to collaborate and do this strategy really openly and available to others. So I think they're really key points. In terms of the static nature of things, we've got in the framework report that we published last week, we have a section around monitoring and evaluation. So we have some metrics that we will be monitoring across the region. We're also taking steps to turn the visual tool, if you've seen it, into a live monitoring tool, so you can actually compare the current standing of deployment against where we need to be in the future. And we think that really draws out the visuals more and more, and holds us all to account really in terms of delivering what we need to do to support decarbonisation through EV. Does that help, Graham? Does that answer?
Grant, yeah, brilliant, thank you. Paul, did you have anything else to add?
No, nothing really. No, I must admit, every time we talk about subject matter like this, I find it very, equally intriguing, and I found it very valuable as well. Thank you, Simon.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. It's I mean, from my perspective, that's pretty much what a deep dive should enable the committee to do, which is to delve into aspects of, in this case, of projects, but more importantly, the risks and the objectives that that are related to it, and the assumptions that sort of sit behind it. So, yeah, really good session. Thank you for that, Daniela. Back to you, given that this is your.
I think that's all I've got really, unless anyone's sort of got any questions on the overall presentation. That's it from me really. I think Kieran and I'll add some more probably in a little while in terms of the risk maturity audit, but yeah, that's it from me.
Great, thank you, and thank you again, Simon. That was great. Just in terms of deep dive going forward, I think one of the I think this topic came out of a discussion that we had at the last meeting, but I think for 2023-24 it would be nice to have a plan of subjects that we intend to bring to committee for deep dive. They can obviously be topics such as this that are particularly relevant. They can also be topics, I think, where the committee feel that they've got limited assurance, an absence of assurance, or the board feel that they've got an absence of assurance. So one of the subjects that I keep coming across, because before each of these meetings, I always go back to the terms of reference, and I keep reading anti-fraud strategy, and I keep asking myself, what assurance does the board get on anti-fraud strategy? So I'm not wishing to sort of dominate the discussion or the agenda for next time, but I think topics like that, they don't just have to be project related, but yeah, topics like that I think might be very useful. Splendid, thank you. So if everybody's happy to.
Sorry, Graham, I think Kevin might have got his hand up.
Sorry, missed you, Kevin. Thank you, Daniela.
Yeah, it's just a quickie really, prompted by attendance at a National Audit and Risk Conference for housing this week. Cyber security and risk is clearly at the top of a lot of organisations' risk registers at the moment. I just wondered though, from an independent member perspective, are we part of the weakest link in respect of, you know, our accessing meetings like this and papers, etc. I don't think it's one that I particularly wanted to sort of stimulate a discussion today. I just think it's something just to flag, because I know that is being thought about in other sectors and organisations. Just thinking about those third-party risks that are probably sitting within organisations and may well be part of the weakest link. Just one for thought for the future.
Yeah, thanks for that, Kevin.
I think under the heading of third-party risk, I think absolutely. I mean, it's the first time today I've been called the weakest link, but not the first time this week. So thanks, Kevin. But yeah, I think third-party risk is very relevant, and that's an interesting take on third-party risk that I hadn't thought about. Brilliant. I think we're still bang on time in terms of the agenda. Paul, we have the quarterly operating report next, and can I just ask before you start whether you were intending to or not? My attention was drawn to the RAG status of the KPIs, many of which suggest that there may be a delay associated with them. I'm just conscious of where we are in terms of the year and where we anticipate being with those in a few months' time at the end of the report. If we could spend just a couple of minutes on that, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. I mean, just to frame it. So first of all, obviously we've migrated from a monthly reporting mechanism to a quarterly mechanism. There's a slight typo on the agenda. That should read July to September, October. Sorry, July to September 22, not October. I think it makes sense to move to quarterly, just because I just think because the nature of the business, there isn't that volume of activity that we would, in terms of change, that we would see on a monthly basis. So I think it's the right thing to do. We would normally invite Tim to be with us because the main areas of activity really are within the operational areas of strategy and strategic rail. But unfortunately Tim's on annual leave today and he couldn't join us. What I'd suggest we do is, if it's okay, is to take any questions or comments people may have in relation to the report. Taking, for example, your point there, Graham, about the KPIs, and give a comprehensive feedback in relation to all of them. That's probably a better response. I think that have a chat with Tim and all the owners of the various KPIs to make sure that there's reasons and explanations as to why they are where they are, and feed that back as part of matters arising. Does that work?
Yeah, if other members are comfortable with that, I'm certainly happy with that.
Was it all the KPIs, Graham, or just the ones that with the red rag? Is that I'm just flicking back to it now.
Yeah, it was the there's a wee summary table just ahead of the individual rag report on page whatever it is, 18, 19.
Yeah.
And I'm just conscious that 12 of them could be read as having potential delays associated with them. So I'm just sort of winding forward in a few precious months, and suddenly it'll be year end. So from a sort of risk of delivery perspective, might be worth getting an overview on that.
No, yeah, very valid point, and I just think it's about being cautious about completion. So where we've got a bit of a symptom here of quarterly reporting that this was a position at September. So again, I think matters arising, not just updating the members on the latest position as part of matters arising when we feed the feedback will probably be quite useful, and I suspect will show some change. Yeah, okay, I'll do that.
Grand, thank you. Is there anybody else got any other points in terms of content of that report? If not, I think we're on financial update. Is David with us today?
I am, yes, Chair. Sorry, Paul?
No, I'll just say you were. I can't see you, but I knew you were there originally.
You're now flashing at the bottom of my screen, David. Thank you.
Here I am.
Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. If I can just share the report, it'll be easier to explain some of what I wanted to highlight. It's a financial update report, which is principally around the position by the end of September. Not a great deal has changed in the last 6 weeks, so I think this is still a valid summary of what's going on. It's covering 3 areas. One is the overall financial position for the year to the end of September. The second is at the half-year point, we took an opportunity to look again at the budget for any elements that needed to be updated. And then the third element is around Treasury Management Strategy, where we need to report on compliance with the Treasury Management Strategy, which was approved by the board. The first part, financial position, there's a table here, lots of numbers. To cut to the core messages, really, at the end of September, we had spent 1.16 million less than we had planned. 2 principal areas are behind that figure. One is in hosted services and NPR analytical support, where there have been lots of changes during the year and it's taking a bit longer than originally planned to actually ramp up activity. The main thing to think about in that area is this is all hosted services are funded specifically for those areas, so we cannot move any resources that are going into those areas to other things. So one of the areas we're now looking at on that on NPR analytical support is what more can be done in the second half of the year to actually get value from the funds that are actually coming into us. The other area, operational areas, the major area of underspend is on back office. You can see there at 0.63 million. That's principally driven by transition costs. Transition costs being the costs of changing the organisation, which has been happening during the year. Again, that was happening a little more slowly than anticipated originally. But also we think the transition costs by the end of the year will be lower. So we're expecting those costs to be around 300,000 lower than originally planned by the time we get to the end of the year. Those would flow through to reserves and become available for the planning in future years. Those are the highlights of the current financial position. I can take us on to the next part, which is the revised budget. And what this table shows you in 3.6 is there are no overall changes in what's planned to be spent. The budget that was set is largely still in place and still valid and still operational. 3.7 goes into a little bit more detail because there has been some activity. Recognising some variations from the original plan, there has been some transfers between different parts of the business, which you can see in the table in 3.7. It's all self-balancing at the moment and anticipated to be so, or lead to savings, again, as mentioned, around transition costs. And then the third element is Treasury Management Update. This isn't backed up by large tables of numbers for a change. This is backed up with some graphs. There are some main points that I think we need to draw out about performance against strategy in the year ahead. The first point is it's always worth remembering that TFN has no ability to borrow. So unlike a local authority, Treasury Management Strategy is about how we manage any temporarily surplus cash and how we may invest that to get some form of return whilst ensuring always that we hold the money securely and it's available when we need it. That first graph shows you typical pattern for us. Grant comes in, it's gradually run down. And that's the essence of why we're talking about temporarily surplus funds. So we try to use those funds in a secure way or invest those funds in a secure way to generate some return within certain constraints. One of the principal constraints we operate within is what we hold in our normal business bank account with Barclays. We operate within a floor of 1 million and a maximum of 5 million. You can see from that graph in the first half year, we did depart from that in a number of cases. So on a comply or explain basis, to explain, for 3 days in July, we were under 1 million, which was, you'll see in the next graph, was a key point where we transitioned from one kind of investment to another. And there was a short period where we were slightly below that 1 million floor. In the opposite direction, particularly earlier in the year, when investment opportunities were a lot more limited, it made more sense to hold funds in our business bank account than invest them elsewhere. because the level of security was the same and the return was better, basically. But generally, over the year, we have held between 1 and 5 million in our business bank account in accordance with the strategy. The last area I'd want to pinpoint in this about compliance is counterparty and counterparty risk. Our first protocol is security. We want to make sure that the money that we invest is safe and will come back to us. So we only invest in the most secure counterparties. We did make a significant change towards the end of June and going into July, where we shifted from DMADF, which is the UK government, into a money market fund, AAA credit rated. So still secure, but better return. So that's what we're trying to do. And that was the main highlight in terms of changes during the year on treasury management. I think those are the main points that need to be highlighted, Chair. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Grand, David. Thank you. So over to colleagues, if anybody has any questions or points to make. No.
Stone silence.
Sorry, Kevin. Go ahead.
Yeah, just a brief question on where do we actually show those investments, the return on those investments in the accounts? I can't recall whether is it sort of so immaterial that we don't really, because I can't recall as having a line for any sort of interest on investments.
Investment income comes through into the finance part of back office, if you like. It has been small in recent years, but because of the change in sort of the wider investment environment going on right now, it is starting to become more significant. So I think you will start to see it featuring a little more. We don't hold huge sums and we're not generating huge sums, but we are starting to generate something more significant in tens of thousands than we were able to in recent years.
Okay, thanks, David.
Thanks, Kevin. So as a non-financial person, David, I found the treasury management stuff the most entertaining. So I was interested in your point about shifting investment choices. So is that change of investment, is that taken within the existing treasury management strategy, or did the strategy have to change to allow us to make those alternative investment choices?
The treasury management strategy allows for shifts between different kinds of counterparties. What it doesn't allow for is if we were seeking to change, which we wouldn't, but if for any reason we were looking to change the level of security, for example, anything significant of that kind would be a departure from the treasury management strategy and would lead, if it needed to be done, to some sort of consideration about a change. However, the change that happened during the year on counterparty risk was all within the treasury strategy because we kept very similar levels of security and liquidity, and it managed to improve yield. So the shift was about, with those two things being kept consistent, generating a bit more for the funds that we actually had. So in that sense, it's all working within the treasury management strategy, which constrains what we can do, but it does allow for that sort of change.
You probably won't recall, in fact, Graham, it was before your time, but from about a couple of years ago, because the numbers were somewhat larger because of the IST programs and the MPR programs, that we had 70 million thrown through the accounts, but we used to have 5 million sat with SSGA, which is a money market account. We had it for a whole year. It just sat there as a residual sum as a consequence of cash flow. And the good thing about it is it doesn't require any management time. It sits there, it generates a reasonable return, and from a liquidity perspective, if it's needed tomorrow, we can get it tomorrow. But we're not into that cycle. We're in a cycle of fairly measured and understanding cash flows. I think the interesting thing that linked to the Treasury presentation and in reference to the Treasury management is one of the things that we're going to consider doing this year at the end of the year for next year is to simplify the Treasury management strategy. It is a document that was probably more suited to where we were 2 or 3 years ago, and where we could have gone. But I think this is the time, I think, just to rethink it and to pare it back to its bare essentials and make sure it's fit for purpose, because it's a little bit. I mean, I don't know if any of the members will recall it, but knowing what's going on in the economy of Japan is quite interesting to some, but possibly not the greatest thing for us based on the volumes of money that we have. And so there's a lot of sort of stock information that is produced that possibly could be interesting reading, but doesn't bear any importance to us going forward. So this is the kind of stuff that's got to be stripped out. But we'd leave the bare essentials that are required from a SITFA perspective to make sure that we've got. So there might be things that we require to disclose as zeros, just to ensure that there's a compliance with a regulation. But where there's no need to report on it, we would probably choose to exclude it and simplify it. So I suppose that's paving the way for February's meeting when we position the strategy going forward.
Great, thank you. I'm just conscious that we're just about at 12 o'clock. I don't know if Liam is still on the call, but I think Liam said that he was going to have to shoot off at midday, just so folk are aware of that. He's probably left already.
I think he's gone. Yeah.
Yeah. So just following up on that final point, Paul, in terms of if you were to make changes to the Treasury management strategy, which committee has oversight of that kind of changes?
I think the A&G has the oversight, but ultimately it was the board that approves the strategy. But it would have been through the A&G committee first. So right. I think the role for it is the review of it has been delegated down, but the ultimate approval, I think, would go back to board. I know in terms of the board paper that we're going to take in December, again, that would give assurance. I think there is a requirement within the Constitution to report on compliance with the Treasury Management Strategy to board, but we would position that as having been through the A&G committee as well.
Yeah. Great, thank you. So if colleagues are happy to move on to the next highlight, which is internal audit update. So we have a progress report that I know captures some of the discussion from last time in terms of forward planning, not just for the remainder of this year, but also into next year. And the report which Daniela mentioned earlier in the meeting, which is around risk maturity. So I'm not quite sure who from RSM is picking up the brief. Kieran?
That would be me, Graham. Yeah. Thank you very much for having me, committee. I'll just give a brief introduction, obviously, with my first attendance. I'm an assistant manager in the Northwest Internal Audit team, and I'm also currently conducting the GDPR review that's in the plan, which I can give you a brief update on as well as part of the progress paper. So yeah, like Graham said, presenting 2 reports today, so I'm going to take them as read. First, I'll discuss the progress paper, and then move on to the risk maturity. So key things from the progress paper is, like Graham said, we've replaced the health and safety audit now with the project management arrangements audit that's currently being scoped. We met with Paul and Tim earlier in the week, and we're just currently scoping that audit to go forward. We also mentioned around the GDPR report that currently is in the field work stage, going through our quality assurance processes. So that's currently in progress. And the report that we're presenting today is the risk maturity report, which I can provide more detail on separately. But obviously that's the advisory review, but we're raising 4 management actions there that have been agreed. I'll just, at this time, I'd take any questions related to the progress report.
I mean, it isn't a question. I just, it's worth reiterating. I think the inclusion of project and program management control makes a heap of sense to me in respect of what is always a limited internal audit resource. So I think that's not to dig on your health and safety, but I think that's probably a sensible move.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And obviously, just make clear. Obviously, we're comfortable with delivery for the end of the year as well. Even though with that change, comfortable to deliver all projects before the end of the year. Okay. I will move on to the risk maturity report now, and then linking kind of with the deep dive as well that you've done earlier in the meeting as well. So Max, my colleague, undertook the review. Just a bit of background in relation to that. He's worked very closely with Paul and Daniela throughout the review, had great engagement from both, and then also good engagement with the interviewees that he met with as well in terms of that. And then obviously moving on to the key highlights from the report. It's an advisory review, so it's obviously building blocks for new individuals and a refresh of areas within the risk management framework, giving it that fresh pair of eyes. We've raised 3 low management actions and 1 medium management action at this time, which I'll just go over now. So the 3 low management actions relate to first one around utilising the Predict system a bit more effectively, just by including a bit more detail, risk champions including a bit more detail relating to the progress updates for each risk, and then also the basis for assessment. Then we've raised an action around the deep dives, which obviously we've already come on to. In terms of the structure of the deep dive, from my review and Alex's review of what's been presented today, it's good structure, what we see other organisations, and obviously it's also about what works for you guys as well. You can obviously mould the structure of the deep dive to better suit you, but in terms of what's been presented today, it's in line with what we'd see as good practice. And then the final low action is just around amending the strategy to just add a bit more specific detail around what factors need to be considered when escalating functional and project risks to operating board. And then the 1 medium action is just around the assurance framework, which I think Daniela mentioned as well. So at this time, I believe our colleague Richard Mackey from our risk and governance consulting team is conversing with Daniela in terms of providing some advice and building on Matt Humphrey's prior work from our consulting team, which took place obviously before Daniela was in post. So just building on that in terms of a board assurance framework and what works best for you guys. I believe that's everything for the report. I'm happy to take any questions now.
Excellent, thank you. Colleagues, if you have any questions in respect of risk maturity or the audit. I shared some thoughts. Oh, sorry, Kevin, you share yours before I share mine. That makes sense.
No, Gav, pleasing report, really, and good to see that's a level of assurance. I suppose just a question of process, really, maybe not for you, Kieran, but for management in terms of the board assurance framework. I see that there's an implementation date of March 23. So I'm assuming that there'll be some sort of ownership expected around this committee. Is the intention that we have first sort of dibs at that board assurance framework documentation and then put a recommendation through to board, or is it the other way around, or a bit of both? I suppose so. It's a process question, really.
Hi, Kevin. Yes, I can probably answer that. So, in terms of the board assurance and what we're looking at the 3 lines of defence really, and how how those 3 lines impact at the different functional levels. So the first stage is actually sort of seeing what those 3 lines of defence look like, and then we'll move on to the implementation of that, which is October time. So I think the first thing we'll come back to is audit and governance in March before we go to board with that sort of structure and how that will look like, and then we'll go into the implementation after that. I think the key thing for us, TFN, is that implementation phase. It's just ensuring that it's suitable for the size of organisation that we are. So at the moment we're doing some trial solutions to see how that will work and sort of fit into TFN really. Again, as Kieran said, working with Richard to see if we can come up with something suitable for us really. So that'll be the first phase in March, coming up with the 3 lines of defence, and then moving into the implementation over time, but probably about October time by the time we get to that point next year.
Great, thanks, Daniela. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, any other points? So I did share some some comments ahead of prior to the meeting. I think one of the things that struck me about the maturity model, and they're all different, one maturity model to another. The interesting thing I thought about this one was that the choice isn't really about how far to move over to the right. I think the choice is, as Daniela just said, what's an appropriate solution for the size of the organisation, risks that the organisation sits with. So it's an interesting model. I think it's a very useful model in that respect. And as I mentioned earlier, I think having that clearer assurance view also helps us to select topics for discussion at the committee, like deep dives. It serves a number of purposes, I think. Just in terms of 3 lines, whilst we're on the subject, the 3 lines model was updated by the Institute of Internal Auditors, I think, in 2020. And it's one of those updates that just gets neglected. People overlook it routinely. So I would ask that if you're looking at 3 lines, to make reference to the very latest model, because it is different to the previous one. But we can happy to talk about that offline if that's
yeah, that's helpful. Thanks, Graham.
If that helps. Excellent, Kieran. Thank you. And thank you, Daniela, if you're happy to move on. So external update. I think Campbell is Karen.
I think Campbell's going to set this paper first, if that's all right, Chair.
All right, thank you. Go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, if I could take you just to page 4 of the report. So this is just our regular progress report. So it's giving an update on the 2020-21 audit and the 2021-22 audit, and also some sort of recent publications which may be of interest to members. I'll take those publications as read, Chair. I'm not going to go through each one of those, but happy to take questions. So in terms of the 2020-21 audit, members will remember that we signed off the financial statements over a year ago now, a long time ago, and also completed our value for money work in our auditor's annual report. That was at the start of this year. What we haven't been able to do yet is complete our whole of government accounts return to the NAO, because we're still waiting for some items of clarification from the NAO in terms of the level of testing they're required, and they won. So that's still outstanding at the moment. Once we get that, it's not a significant piece of work. In terms of 2021-22, we presented our audit completion report in sort of September. And at that point, if you remember, we reported there were a number of items outstanding. I'll just give you an update on each of those. I'll come back to the pension fund in a second. In terms of the narrative report, that's been completed with no matters to report. We always have our final closing procedures once we receive the signed set of financial statements that have been approved. So that there's very little work to do on that, and that will always be an outstanding item on every audit. And finally, we're still waiting for the NEO guidance for the whole of government accounts return for 21-22. And just on the bottom there, we will be completing our value for money conclusion as we did last year within 3 months of signing the audit opinion. I mentioned I was going to come back to the pension fund assurance because that's really the sticking point at the moment, and I know Karen can give you a more sort of up-to-date picture on that. So if I may, I'll hand over to Karen for that.
Yeah, thanks, Campbell. So what we are waiting for now is confirmation from the pension fund auditor that the information that has been used by the actuaries to generate the information that you include in your accounts is correct. So in effect, it's a pension fund audit matter. I'm also the auditor for Greater Manchester Pension Fund, so I do kind of have a little bit more understanding than might otherwise be the case of where that audit is up to. We are very close to completion on the pension fund audit. It may be completed by the end of November, but unfortunately the things that we're still waiting for are out of our hands and also the pension fund. So we're waiting for information from third parties, which is kind of adding a little bit more of a delay into the process. If we receive the letter at any time before the 30th of November, we will, of course, be able to conclude your audit and sign off subject to receipt of your approved accounts and letter of rep within a day or two. So hopefully that will progress next week as we plan. But at the moment, there is a risk that we won't receive it by the end of the month.
Thanks, Karen. Chair, that's all I was going to cover in the progress report, but Karen and myself are happy to take any questions on the report and the audit of the financial statements.
Brilliant, thank you.
Shall I just I mean, if the letter doesn't arrive, my understanding is that we will just have to publish a notice on our website of our inability to have the accounts signed because of this matter. And it's the same as everybody else. Everybody else who's part of the JMP fund will be doing the same thing. So it's not a. I don't think it's a particularly big issue. It's just a case of we just got there's a process that we need to follow. So we'll publish that, and then as soon as the letter arrives, on the assumption it doesn't require any adjustment or amendment to the accounts, then we would then just sign the accounts and send the rep letter to Karen and Campbell.
Yeah.
There was one other thing just on the agenda. I thought it'd be useful just to update the members about the sort of developments in relation to the PSAA. So the PSAA is the public sector audit appointments. It's a body that's set up to effectively take the management of the audit function out of the hands and do it collectively. And when it's worked very well. We've been part of that for the first 5 years of the organisation, and there was a procurement exercise it's reaching its conclusion now. I don't think it's yet formally been concluded. I think we're in the middle of a consultation period as we speak. We, however, have given our response to the consultation to say that we have no objections to the proposals that have been made as part of the consultation. So this will see the external auditors being appointed for the years commencing the 1st of April 24 for the next 5 years. Mazars will be with us for this year, and I think we're quite hopeful that if it pans out according to the way that it's going, that we will hopefully have Mazars going forward. I think we're keen for that, and have expressed our view that we don't see we have no objections to that proposal if that's what comes out. And equally, I would hope that Karen and Campbell mirror that sentiment and don't say no. We don't want to be associated with you guys. So that's just an update. And again, it works very, very well, and it's it effectively removes any commercial discussion from between us, really. Kevin?
Thank you, Paul. Does that relationship, just out of interest, does that relationship with PSAA, does that also have benefits in terms of management time and effort?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, to be quite frank, to know that we've got a relationship established for 5 years, as opposed to you wouldn't want to be thinking about changing any external relationship anyway, because a lot of it's about embedding and understanding process and the way that we work, and TFN has its nuances. I mean, we regularly have exchanges around going concern, as an example. But so these are conversations you just prefer not to have with lots of new people. So it's very efficient and it saves a lot of time. Yeah.
Chair, if it might be helpful if I just come in on the back of that as well, because your audit requirements are set in legislation, and that legislation requires you to put particular arrangements in place if you want to go your own way. So you are absolutely entitled to opt out of the PSA scheme and make your own audit appointment, but you need to set up a separate audit panel that will oversee that and go through a formal process, including reporting back to that panel. So I think the general view that the Local Government Association supports is that you opt into the national scheme and let PSA manage the procurement process, so that you have an independently appointed auditor, and because you are spending taxpayers' money, there is clarity and you can demonstrate that independence. You took a formal decision to opt into the PSA scheme some time ago, and PSA, just for your information, is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Local Government Association.
Great, thank you. Sounds a lot like the argument for Brexit, but we don't need to go down that cul-de-sac, do we? Kevin, over to you, sir.
Yeah, it's just for my understanding, I'm just a bit confused about the status of the NAO's whole of government accounts guidance. So, is it the case then that because on page 9, it indicates that we're expected to make returns by the 31st of August, which clearly has passed for 2021 accounts, but I'm not clear on the deadline for 21-22 and what exactly it is that we're waiting for. Because if they've issued the guidance, what is it that we're waiting? I can understand the pension issue, but yeah, what is it that we're waiting for if we've got the guidance?
It's probably a rather complicated thing to explain, really, although it shouldn't be. So a couple of years ago, a decision was taken by Treasury to adopt a particular software system for collecting the information. That software system has been pretty challenging. So the NAO struggled to issue guidance originally because there were some problems with the actual tool that you were required to load your information into, and then we were required to audit under, which is called Oscar. But I'll park that for a minute. It was kind of an IT related problem. They have then issued the guidance in respect of 2021, and I think you are under the threshold, so there is nothing we need to do. The problem is that we do the WGA work as part of the code of practice. Once we've done it and we certify your audit closed, we can't go back and do anything further, so your audit will be complete. And what the NAO do is, in their capacity as the group auditor, they select certain audits that they wish to follow up and review the work in more detail as part of the whole of government accounts group, if you will. They haven't made that selection yet, and so I can't certify the return to say everything's okay if they're then going to come along and ask me to do additional procedures on it. So it's a bit of a nuance, really, about what comes first, the chicken or the egg, at the moment, and I expect that it will come to a resolution fairly quickly in the next month or two. Part of the issue that's kind of undermining their position is that separately there is a national issue around accounting for infrastructure that applies to local authorities who own roads and bridges and so on, that means that they can't finalise their accounts. So the NAO isn't in a great place to select its samples for component audit additional testing when it hasn't got a full set of audit reports in, and it can't have those until the infrastructure asset issue is resolved. So I think it will remain as it is for a few more months yet. I think at some point, probably towards the end of March 2023, what will happen is we'll be told you've not been selected as a sample component. That's because, given your size, I wouldn't expect you to be, and we'll conclude both in short order, so probably one on Monday, one on Tuesday almost, just to make sure that we get things in a sequential order.
Thanks, Karen. That's helpful, if confusing.
Well, it's your own fault for asking the question.
Oh, no.
Grant, thank you, Karen, for trying to help.
If that wasn't clear, I can try again.
Excellent. Are we happy to move on? Thank you for the reminder that I still haven't read the 51 pages of the NAO's Good Practice Guide, the Audit and Risk Assurance Committee Effectiveness Tool. So I'll make sure I download and read that maybe on Sunday. Excellent. So item 9 on the agenda is the annual governance statement, the process that captures that. Is that you, Emma, in Julie's?
It is me, yes, it is. Really just to say that this is in hand. I think that we've done previous statements. It's a requirement of our statutory obligations. We do it in line with SEPFA guidelines, but I think this year might be a little more of an overhaul in terms of checking that the guidance we're complying with properly and that there aren't any updates. Some comments from you, I think, Graham. I think you might have some input on this, and Paul and I have already spoken about making it easier to access and such like that. But otherwise, I guess the point is it's happening. I think it'll come back to you in February as a committee to look at the next draft. But in the meantime, if there are any overarching or general comments, then we're welcoming those.
Grand, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I see it as a quite a central output in terms of
absolutely
his work, and I've always been struck by reporting that claims to provide evidence, but all it actually does is provide you with a list of controls that should be operating and should be effective, and it doesn't really opine on either. So that's just
understood. Yes,
an area of emphasis, I suppose. Brilliant. So we will look forward to going through that as part of the February meeting. But as Emma said, if anybody has any particular thoughts or pointers in terms of process or content, I guess the invitation is there in terms of feeding them in.
Absolutely, and I think given how much work has been done in terms of external audits and that kind of thing, then we're in a good place. But it's making sure that that's all reflected.
Great, thank you. So unfortunately, I think that's pretty much it.
Kevin had his hand up.
Sorry, Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just I think I've raised this in previous years, but our role as a committee in signing off this into and recommending to board always has a slight uneasiness around the effectiveness, the governance effectiveness agenda. In that, I'm certainly not cited. Others may be. I'm not cited on the efficacy of other committees. And so there's always a slight unease when we're, asked to sort of approve and recommend, or at least to recommend to board. So it's just something perhaps just to flag up, Emma, in terms of, where do we get that assurance from as part of the review that you're undertaking? So I understand, that we have the key role to play in terms of the oversight of the review team, but it still just begs that question for me, and I have raised it, I think, in previous review years.
So, given everything links into different parts, how do you have the comfort that all of those other parts are working fine?
Yeah, I think it's whatever you're bringing back in the new year, I think it just needs to cover some of that off in terms of so So I'm not picking on anyone in particular, but so for instance, how do I know that the scrutiny committee is an effective and functioning, sustainable committee? I don't. I've not seen any evidence to say one way or the other.
Yeah.
So I suppose I'm looking for the review team to come back with some of that, so what were the terms of reference? Have they met those, and how do we know?
Okay.
That's just.
I think this could feed in well to a comment that Graham has raised before about it's where's as opposed to talking about the process, it's where's the output and what's the demonstration of the evidence. That's probably where we need to go, I think. So and then the information is there. So talking about the need to have a scrutiny committee is one thing, but saying that it's met on X number of occasions and minutes are available here and here probably goes more towards what you're saying, Kevin. So I think it's a very good point, and
absolutely.
Yeah.
And you're right. How can you sign off on something if you don't at least have access to that? Yeah.
So I think
that's really helpful. Thank you.
I think we're all in violent agreement and maybe all coming at it from a slightly different place. But I think if I think back to last year's value for money assessment, which under the heading of evidence listed out controls, and it listed out things like the example that Kevin just provided, which was it would list a committee. Now that isn't evidence of anything other than the fact that you've got a committee, and as Kevin pointed out, you need to understand. So, and it goes back to my previous comment from the Mazars document. There are mechanisms to measure the effectiveness of committees, and government are kind enough to publish them. So if we wanted to go down that road, we could look for that. So as long as we have something that is more meaningful than simply a list of controls, that will be a step towards being able to opine on whether they're effective and suitable, which I think is the ultimately the aim.
Yeah.
But not an easy ask, but a worthwhile ask, I think.
Yeah. But very, very definitely worthwhile. And I think that today was just to say this might look a little bit different from previous years, but for good reasons. So thank you for that.
Perfect. Grand. So again, unfortunately, we've come to the end. So I thank you to those who have presented and shared information. I thought it was a very useful deep dive. I think it was the first opportunity I've had to take part in that particular exercise. So that was great. We have the next meeting already scheduled, I think, for Friday the 17th February. Yes, is that? I presume that's in person, or have we not yet determined that? I don't think we necessarily have to determine that.
Gary, are you aware whether we've set that as a formal or not?
I think unless there's a decision to be made that needs sort of members to be face to face, I think it'll probably be virtual. But we'll need to discuss whether there's any decision to be made, and then we'll make that decision accordingly.
Okay.
I mean, Manchester in February is always quite attractive, so don't let that put you off. Excellent.
It might be if you live in Manchester. You've got to travel and the trains don't work. It's not an attractive proposition.
No, indeed. Excellent. So just briefly back to members, if anybody has any, David or Kevin or Keith, I don't know whether Hans is still on the call. Yes, Hans is. If anybody has any final comments.
Chair, I would just like to welcome Paul as our new 151 officer. That gives him a big smile on his face, I see, and he rightly deserves. I have to say, it's not ratified yet until the next full board meeting, but I'm assured it will be. I will certainly be proposing it on behalf of the committee that did the interviews, which was a really excellent process, and somebody had to be appointed, and we made it clear from the outset that we would appoint the best person for the job, and I'm certainly of the opinion that we've been able to do that. So, just my comment, Chair.
Grand, thank you, Keith. Apologies, Paul, for not raising that.
That's fine.
Earlier. David, over to you.
Chair, just to basically give my apologies for the past few months. I haven't been able to make the last couple of meetings. My other work has been somewhat chaotic, but that is now sorted out, and I hope to go back to being a regular attender. So, yeah, looking forward to what's coming up, and having not been in the last two meetings with the preparation for that deep dive, I found it really interesting, very thorough, and a really interesting tangent to take in terms of the work for TFM. So thank you to all for that.
Grant, thank you, David. Okay. Good. Well, if that's everybody, thank you for your attendance. Thank you for the time and effort that it takes to set these things up and manage them, Gary and Paul in particular, and Daniela. So if we don't speak before, it will be February.